We have pictures at the back. I don't know, if you weren't involved in it, maybe some of you didn't know that we had a flood in June. It was a good-sized one. I know, because we were out of our house for a whole week before we could get in. And we went back and were there 3 days, Bob?
Yeah.
Long enough for me to can stuff and put on the kitchen cabinet that was thrown out after the next flood. And then we went out again, and we didn't get home for 6 months. So I remember it very vividly. That's why on my snapshots back there, I took a lot of pictures in the June flood. By the time the real one came along, I was worn out. I didn't take many more pictures. So that's why if you see June flood and wonder what it is, that's it. I got to thinking about the people who lived in Weaver Bottom, and there aren't many of them left around. They've gone. I didn't ask Annabelle to bring her mother back tonight.
Well, then she'd been through it once and she didn't want to go through it.
That's right, once is enough. I think we're going to start with Sweet over here. Sweet has a home movie type thing that he took up in Lawrence, and I think we'll start with that. Okay? Yeah, we'll turn the lights out. Glenn, can you get the lights out back there?
Hey Lois, what was the dates of the flood then?
I don't know. The 13th of July was when it was the deepest in Kansas City. When was
Yeah,
it?
it was the deepest in Weaver.
Here on the
July
13th?
13th.
Oh, Friday the 13th.
Today's the 12th?
Do we need the drapes closed over here?
13th.
So it'd be,
What are they gonna show it on, Wilson?
We'll never see that.
They'll have to push the screen back.
Can you put it at an angle?
Well, you have to realize now, this is 8mm. This is not like your 16 or something where you can have a great big picture.
Yeah, but we can't see over their heads. I mean, it needs to be
Can you
back.
turn it?
It's going to be right up in here.
Gone down and went through the picnic we went to over in Garden. It was on this film. We can't take it out, so just have to look at it. And then by Friday, the 13th of July, when it really came up. We'll have to see whether you can see this.
Clarence and I was left up there on the hill. Everyone went home. And we were crying in our suits because we had lost everything. Clarence said, "How much money you got?" And I said, "Well, I got $1.50." And he said, "Well, I got $1.50. Let's go to Lawrence and get a pint of whiskey and a jug of wine." And the funny part was that we did. We went up and got it, and on the way back, right in front of Isley's, we had flat tire. But do all of you know Reverend Bauer? Remember him? He was our minister. He come by, "Oh, I'll help you change it." Claire said, "No, you go on. You go on." "Bob and I'll change that." So, "No, I'm going to stay here and help you." Well, I opened the trunk, and he looks in there, and I said, "Clarence, you forgot your wine and whiskey." And Clarence's face got red. So we changed the tire, and Reverend went on, and we got down there. We was going to sit on a rock pile and drink it, and Clarence said, "That's mine. You're not going to get it." But he finally let me have some. And then after the water started down, we went in boats. And before this happened, Bob and I was going to go back and do something at our house. And Delmer said, "Well, you take the boat and feed my chickens." And the barn of his huge barn, there's a picture of it back there, dropped in a hole. So Bob said, "Well, you get up there in front and I'll run the motor." And he said, "When you grab a hold of that gate and then hold it tight, and I'll leave the motor running and I'll jump up and feed the chickens and come back down." And just as he got there, the motor died. And I was hanging on that gate. Neither one of us could swim. And that water was going to Timbuktu now. I mean, I was scared. Bob was scared. He said, "We're going to drown." I said, "Get that motor started. I'll hang on till you get it started." And he finally got it started in about 5 minutes. And we didn't feed the chickens. We went on back. We never even went across. And how we ever got across that river like we did with 10-horse motors, we'll never know. I don't see how we ever went across there with them little motors. Because is you could start to go upstream, and it would take you a mile on down before you could get back out of the current. And it was scary. So then when the water went down, after it went clear down to where we could walk, Clarence and I started walking the road. And he missed that hole by that far where that had cut way down in there. And it's a wonder we didn't drown. If we would have been 3 feet over, we'd have drowned because we couldn't swim. But that was dangerous going back in after the flood. And then we had to start cleaning up our tools and everything. I lost the combine. I lost everything we had. And we had 3,500 bushels of beer corn that we had to scoop out because it was going to set our hay barn on fire. It's got so hot. And then that ruined. So we lost even the crop before in the barn. So it was a disaster for Lois and I. We lost everything we had. We didn't have a dime to our name. But you can come back. But I don't think you could come back today like we did then, because things cost too much now. And that's the difference in the people that I see up having the floodwaters up there now. Is those people, I don't see how they'll ever get back on their feet. I really don't. Because it's going to be terrific. And the Corps of Engineers, I'm on that MOARC Association for 4 states. And 2-3 years ago, they were saying we'd never have another 51 flood. And I made the statement that we will have bigger floods than 51, and they laughed me out of the building. Well, I was down there Friday, and they weren't laughing. So they see now, they said, well, we understand what you told us back then, what would happen. But they couldn't see that. But I tell you, you can really feel sorry for those people, what they're going through with now. Because you take a lot of old people that have lost everything they've got, and they won't be able to replace it.
We didn't lose everything. Clarence Brewers told those men when they went down to move our things up that if they were just going down there and break everything up, they weren't going. I imagine about 60 pieces of Fostoria crystal. They got the wash tubs, everything they could find, and they wrapped every piece. I still have it today. Took it all upstairs. They took all my china that was in that dining room suite and took the legs off the table because our stair upstairs had a right angle turn. You couldn't get just everything up there. They took it all apart. We had a china closet, a buffet, and a table, and 6 chairs, and we still have those today thanks to those guys, and they did take good care of things. We had a new living room suite that they put on top of stuff, and it fell in. I scrubbed mud off it for quite a while, and we used it again for a while because it was only 6 months old. And I thought, my children's, all their baby pictures were in the piano bench, and the piano bench collapsed. I found them upstairs. Somebody opened the piano bench and took them up. And I was really grateful to those people because those things mean a lot to you. We lived with my parents for 6 months. We got home just before Christmas. And when we started to go in, Bob and his dad walked through all that water. How far did you walk through water? Probably a mile, didn't you? To go down and shovel that barn out. When I went down, there was still water like this deep standing that we had to wade through. And I'd start trying to clean things up. And I found out, even if you got them washed, there wasn't a clean place to put them. If anything was closed, like a cupboard door, you couldn't get it open. And if it was open, you couldn't get it closed. Everything metal corroded. And I remember looking out the front door when I first got in, and there was somebody's doll hanging in the fence on the front. And out there by the front fence was a single rose bush with a bloom on it, because the mud as it came around the house formed piles like snowdrifts. It literally drifted. And there where there was no mud piled up was this rose bloom. Good shape, as good as be expected.
Well, I might tell, Julie, and you might remember, after, probably 3 or 4 days, your dad was standing outside and 3 hogs came up from the east. You remember that? Walked in his yard and no one ever knew where they were, and after he got so he could walk, he trapped them. And they stayed in the trees down there in the timber. And we don't know where they came from. He put them in these locks. And they lived through that 51
Well,
flood.
the rest of his hogs were out to our place,
Yeah.
south of town, except this sow and pigs.
Yeah, but he knew that they had to be somebody else's.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you couldn't believe that they could hang in that tree, because that water run 2 solid weeks.
Or didn't Hard Shellac lose some hogs?
I don't know who it was, but they had a hog house that had hogs in it, and they busted up on my place back there. And Clarence and I was watching. There was a guy come across the river, and he thought he was going to save them. And he was in a boat, and they very near drowning him. All those hogs tried to get in the boat at once. And he got away from them, but I'll tell you, you never try to go and try to save a hog in water, because they're going to drown you.
Jack, the McCabe family was kind of surrounded by water. You got anything you want to tell us about?
Well, it rained 5 inches the other day, or whatever your rain gauge it may be. People start using the 51 flood as a reference.
Can't hear you.
Well, in 51, my dad used the 1903 flood as a reference. He always told us there was that much water in the house, so if there's ever a flood as bad as 1903, everything in our house is going to be flooded. And listening to the weather reports and one thing and another, we already in June combined 1 round of wheat, and we were ready to start combining, and then it started raining, and in July, they had these big rains, and he had moved we were milking cows, he had moved those out to Carl, his brother-in-law, Taylor, and we had 1,000 turkeys, and we knew we couldn't get feed in and out, and we knew the milk truck couldn't get in to haul the milk away, so we'd already moved that kind of stock out. And we did a lot of planning there in a few days. But I remember the night we moved, he got up 4 o'clock in the morning, and he went down to Highway 10, and he says, the walkie is going to come over that highway any time now, so let's move our furniture upstairs. And we moved everything upstairs except the refrigerator. We pulled the drawers out of the cabinets in the kitchen, took everything upstairs as fast as we could. And then we went back down to the road, or the highway, and we saw we couldn't get out that way. So Bob went ahead of me. No, I went ahead of Bob in the truck, and I put 1 wheel between the rails and 1 wheel on the outside in the rock on the side, and I had my mother in the truck, and we drove half-mile up to Pendleton, where Pendleton is, and then we went west.
That's on the railroad track.
Yeah, on the railroad track. And Bob was pulling a wagon that had all the turkey feed on it, and it slid and got caught on a rail, so he just unhitched with the M tractor. And then we went on up to Pendleton, and we went through water, of course, to get to Highway 10, and then we wanted to go to Eudora. We didn't want to go to Lawrence because all our stock was out in Taylor, so our turkeys coming. So he went ahead of me with the M tractor, and he kept 1 wheel on the muddy shoulder and in the front, and the left-hand wheel on the pavement, and I followed him in the truck, and we went through this place down here at Music's, and the water was running over the highway then, about that deep. And these people that went to work at the plant, they told them to go home. Well, these people were coming back, and here these people were following the current and getting over off the highway, and many of them, the car was drowning out. We didn't know whether to stop and help them or to keep going. Never did hear of anybody's car going over the side there, but it was about a foot drop over in that other slough on the north side of Highway 10. Anyway, we got to Eudora, course, only thing we lost was that feed. We had all our turkeys were out, all our cows were out, and we had about 20 pheasants. We even took those out. The only thing we didn't take out was some ducks. And those ducks stayed around the chicken house there. We ate them. The only thing we left downstairs was a refrigerator. Now this was a used refrigerator when my mother bought it. We washed that out with a hose and started up, and she was using that when she died.
Right, was it?
So, now the old schoolhouse had that mark around it for 1903 flood. The 51 flood was about that much higher. And I remember how high it was where we lived because we had a John Deere tractor that sit there in front of the garage. When we went back in a boat, about that much of the exhaust pipe was sticking out on that tractor. Well, it was so muddy, that's the only thing we had to move around there. We just worked that out with some diesel fuel and started up.
Thank you.
Bob, is that where you're living now?
Bob built a new house there. When he got married, he fixed that house up. He took all that mud out, put new cabinets, cleaned out the mud in the floor,
Lois?
and then he built a new house. And it's built high enough now so that would stand the 51 level.
What time of day was it you come to work?
We got up at 4 o'clock and started moving furniture, and it had gotten daylight when we started down the track, and those plant people had gone to work and were told to come back, so whatever shift change was out there.
Well, I was working up student union until I heard the Mayor Cooley's, and he had a tractor that was pulling through, and it was dropping 3 feet or better. Coming off the walk, he was dropping over in the
Yeah.
field.
Now, see, my dad saw that. He said, if the walkie is gonna get us, we gotta get out of here now. Everybody thought, the river is what was gonna get you in 51. It wasn't the river, it was the walkie.
Well, it didn't have any place to go.
It
It couldn't get out of the car, so it just backed up.
I think a lot of us heard about that 1903 flood when we were growing up. There'd never be another flood like 1903, and my father-in-law said there will never be water in that house because I built it higher than the 1903 level. Kermit, do you have anything to say?
Well, I got in on the tail end of the flood. Weaver Bottom looked like a big lake, and they had a dike on the lower end and on the upper end, and it went over the upper end and filled it. Well, it was going over the lower end too, and back across the railroad track. And my brothers was farming down there, and they said, well, when that goes down, if we have to let that water out, it'll cut a river through our fields. And I said, well, at that time I'd have dynamite. And I said, we'll go down and blow a hole in the dike, and as the water goes down, it'll go through the hole that we blew in the dike. So we went down, and then you could buy dynamite. And bought 2 cases of dynamite. And we got in a boat, and it was high enough yet that we went across the railroad track in a boat. And went over to the lower end of the bottom, and I set 2 cases of dynamite. And the hole was still there. You can go down and see the hole was still there in the bottom of the dike. And when the water went down, it all went down the same on the outside or on the inside. And it didn't cut any holes in the dike.
Where's the dike at? Where's the dike?
East end of Weaver Bottom.
That's the east end. It's still there. The dike is still there, except it's got a big hole in it. They also cut another hole later next to the railroad track that wasn't there. And that's where the creek come through this time.
Dike was about a quarter mile east of the Johnson Douglas County line.
You couldn't put your finger in this hole and stop it coming like a
Not very well. Two cases.
Do you have a
make pretty
story?
good hope.
Yes. We should have Edna Music Schmidt here, Harry Schmidt's wife. She was home and the water was coming up, so she got the big truck to us, and she got her son William in there, and she left home, and Harry, her husband, was coming down the railroad track side in a boat to pick him up. Well, she got where they're at Nora, just north of Nora it is. There's a bunch of rock in the road, and she was parked on the south side of that rocks. She first got out and got up in the bed of the truck. Then she got up on top of the cab. And by that time, Harry had got to her and the son and picked him up. But when they went back to get the truck, there was a big hole right behind the truck. And that's where those rocks are in the road now. Everybody will notice those rocks as you go down the road. And another deal, for the lumberyard up here, the water was up to here on me, out on the west side. I've got some pictures of it. That's all I have to say.
Thanks. Didn't they take John Altenberg and Larry Lefholtz off the top of the house up there? They stayed to put furniture up and couldn't get out, and they came in a boat and got them, I think, in that bottom up there. And we ran fast, I guess. They didn't have to take us out in boats. Linda said that she saw the water in Kansas City. Do you have something you want to say about it?
Well, the particular part of Kansas City, Missouri that I was raised in didn't have any flood damage, but I couldn't understand why I couldn't, I guess, talk to my friends and get through to my friends that were in Kansas City, Kansas. At that time, the entire intercity viaduct that went between the two cities was underwater, or, you know, you couldn't, there's no way. And finally, my dad gave up and he took me down as far as we could go to show me why. Because the entire residential area of Rosedale and almost all of Armourdale were underwater, totally underwater. And Sheffield Steel Plant at that time had like 1,500 to 2,000 workers. It was totally in underwater for the East Bottoms there. Sears and Roebuck at 15th and Cleveland was totally underwater. In fact, Sears still to this day has their 51 flood markers up on their building, and they paint them every year. And they paint 1951 on the top of them. My parents still live in Kansas City. That, and I got a few from I do in-home care for the state of Kansas. Mrs. Harris lives here in town. She remembers having to go clear out by Baldwin, she said, and I think she means probably Highway 59, to get into Lawrence to be able to go to work even 1 or 2 days a week. And Wilbur Chris, he talks, and Lydia Coleman lives in North Lawrence, and they talk about all of North Lawrence being underwater and not going anywhere unless you went by boat. Mr. and Mrs. Greer stood on the Kansas River Bridge in Lawrence and watched their 2-story house float down the river. I have another lady here in town that is a very good friend of mine that was clinging to a tree with her small son in her hand, and she lost her son. I have a couple of good ones, though, too. It seems that the roof all floated off of the Jayhawk Motel in North Lawrence, and the roofs were all going down the river. Also, there at that time was a Mr. Minner, and I think he'd probably be over 100 now, but he was a moonshiner in Lawrence and had his moonshine still out on 11th Street down by the river where you see those old railroad cars that are falling in and everything, and still and all, and railroad cars that he was in at that time went down the river and lost everything. They said they found moonshine as far away as Linwood and every place else, just, you know. And the Kansas City was sad, really, because we were in Northeast, we were up high, but there was nowhere we could go. And the people that were in Rosedale, Armourdale, right now, you see the pictures of Southwest Boulevard on the TV. When I was a kid, those pictures, that didn't even do justice. The water was twice that high. And all of these places.
I've got 2 books over there that are on the 51 flood in Kansas City. They're pictures, a lot of pictures.
And then Mr. Chris was telling me last night that in Topeka, the 24 highway, where you go across the bridge, and there used to be a very huge Montgomery Ward store that is kind of down under. You have to go across the bridge and turn to go down under. All of that area was totally underwater. They were going by boat. They couldn't go anywhere else. You know, and my mother, as a supervisor for Montgomery Ward and Company for the houseware department, remembers people coming in with Red Cross vouchers in order to replace, you know, what they had lost, or even try to replace what they had lost. And it was sad, because Rosedale was just directly, and is just directly across the viaduct, but you couldn't see anything but water. It's just, you know.
Thank you.
So that's about it.
Well, I have a picture here of North Lawrence on Friday the 13th, 1951.
Okay, you want to bring those up and put them up here now, and anybody else who has newspapers? I would just remind of one more story I remember hearing from this area. The Vitts who lived across the river decided to stay in that night, didn't they? They put all their belongings in their car so they could leave early the next morning, and the water came and whirled and dropped the car and everything in a big hole, and they had to come out by boat.
In that hole out there in town.
Well, I think we better wind this up.
Mr. Aiken.
Oh, sorry, Tom.
Time for one more story?
One more story, sure. I'm going to give you this because you don't yell as loud as I do.
That's what anybody can do me.
She wants you over here where she can get your picture.
Oh.
She's preserving this for posterity.
I didn't lose anything in the flood, but that was my second year in the LP gas business, and Friday the 13th, the radio came on that morning and said, you can't get to Eudora from here, because it's underwater, the roads were underwater. And I couldn't get to Lawrence to my business. That was on Friday the 13th, and by Monday, I went around by Overbrook, through Topeka, and back down to Lawrence, and that was when 7th Street was still open, before 6th Street went through. And when you come over that hill, all you could see was water. I mean, all over that thing. Just scared the living daylights out of it. But I had some customers down by Linwood that were on bottle gas, and that was my job to deliver bottle gas. So I decided I'd pack up some bottles and go down to Linwood, because I could get around through the hills and get down there. And I got my bottles delivered about around 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. It was still daylight yet, but it was beginning to, that was before daylight saving time. It was beginning to get a little bit dusk. And I said, boy, I sure don't want to have to go clear back around by Topeka to go home. I'll be 11 o'clock before I get there. So I said, I think I know the way through North Lawrence and through the water. So I was in the pickup, so I said, I think I can follow the road. And I got along pretty good till I come to the intersection where 2nd and 3rd Street come together. And I got off the pavement, and the water was coming in, and I was stopped. The water was coming in the floorboards of the pickup, and there wasn't nothing to do but to get out and walk. That's all it was. And I walked down 3rd Street with the water up to here, and there was some old vicious dogs on the bank that just loved to get to me, but they didn't want to get in that water. And I walked clear down 3rd Street until I got to dry land at the end of the bridge. And Art Niece was running a standard filling station there at the end of the bridge on the south side then. I went in there and called Dorothy and told her to come and get me. And that was my story. We went back the next morning and with the tractor and pulled the pickup through the water and got it back up. No damage. Didn't hurt the pickup any, but the good Lord was with me because I could have stepped on glass or in a hole or
anything going down Third Street, and the water was up to here, and I couldn't see anything but water. And no lights, it was dark, electricity was off, nothing. It was a little scary.
Thank you, Tom. And thanks to all of you people that shared your experiences. You know, it's one of those things that was interesting when it happened, but you sure wouldn't want to do it over again. I want to remind you that in September, and I had the date, but it's gone now, my memory being what it is, but anyhow, it'll be the second Monday night in September, and for our program that night, Bob Fulkerson, who used to run the Victory Theater, took movies when he was here. And Vi had talked to him recently. He's got pictures of a lot of kids. He doesn't know who they are. So you're all supposed to come and see if you can pick out the kids for him and enjoy seeing that little slice of nostalgia. And I hope some of you signed up for pies and you come prepared to buy a slice of pie, because we can always use a little extra money around here. And see you all next month. Thanks for coming tonight. Bertha.
If you didn't sign up for pies,